Jennifer,
Hello.
how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. This is very exciting for me. This is my first Instagram Live. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, of course, of course. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Perfect timing for 4 o'clock on the dot. So really quickly, I just wanted to give some brief introductions for those who weren't here for the first episode 2 weeks ago. My name is Jen. I'm the environment manager at Poder Latinx in Florida, and I also handle digital work, which is what I'm doing here. You know, crazy times, do very different things to connect people. So this is our second episode of our new series, which is Eco Poder. This is going to be happening every 2 weeks. Different speaker every other week, different topic, and just hopefully serve our community like resources, education, a bunch of other different things. So that was my introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and Mark.
Well, thanks, Jennifer. My name is Mark Magana. I am the founding president and CEO of GreenLatinos. We are a national network of Latino environmental and conservation advocates. We have priority areas in climate change and clean air, clean water equity, public lands and ocean, clean transportation, and environmental justice and civil rights. So
Awesome.
thank you for this opportunity. I'd love to get started with this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So this episode is going to focus entirely on new executive orders that were passed by the new Biden administration in their first few weeks in office. So super exciting that the new administration is taking like bold steps to combat the climate crisis. We all know that we're all living with the effects, but it's disproportionately affecting our brown and black communities around the country, around the world, really. But it's important that the United States takes bold action, and that's exactly what we've been seeing from the administration in the really short amount of time that they've been in office. So, for those of you who don't know about the executive orders that have been passed, I wanted to quickly list them for you all so that you know what we're talking about. So, in the 2 rounds of executive orders that have been signed, the Biden administration has rejoined the Paris Agreement, canceled the XL pipeline permit, initiated a plan to combat climate change that includes that the United States determines its targets for emissions reduction, suspending new oil and gas leasing on public lands, conserving 30% of federal lands and water by 2030, establishing the Office of Domestic Climate Policy and a National Climate Task Force, creating a working group to assist communities impacted by coal mining and power plants, and creating an environmental justice council to address the disproportionate health, environmental, economic, and climate impacts of disadvantaged communities. So I know a lot of those things specifically align with some of the things that your organization is doing, Mark. So what do you think about these executive orders, and what do you think is the most impactful for the Latinx community in the United States?
Man, that was a mouthful, and you got them out quickly. Congratulations. I was about to take 20 minutes just to go over one of them, but I do appreciate that. They've been very significant output of executive actions by this administration, starting as you did with listing the restoration of the United States and the Paris Agreement on climate change. This is a global issue. It's a global issue for us. It's a global issue for our community. We have family, friends, communities in areas that are desperately being hit hard by the effects of climate change, forcing climate migration, unable to grow crops that they've grown throughout their history, unable to survive in a way that they've survived in a one-to-one relationship with their land and their water, and of no fault of their own. Communities like us and China and others that have polluted the airs for centuries in our effort to just grow exponentially without any consideration for our land and air and water. And so all these are very important. I mean, the administration did an executive order to promote racial equity, conducting equity assessments with agencies, and reallocating resources to expand and advance equity for all. And many of these, they're fantastic on paper, these executive orders, but we need to make sure as communities that we follow up with them, that we make sure that they are enforced. It's one thing for them to write an executive order, but it's another thing for them to enforce it, and enforce it continually and across the board. and make sure that it's enforced. That's the key. We're canceling the Keystone XL pipeline. Other issues that we're doing to combat climate change. I also want to mention that there is an initiative to make sure that 40% of the federal funds in this area flow to disadvantaged communities, and that is significant. So we have to make sure that that's enforced. He also pulled federal funding and pulled the emergency order for the border wall. I mean, the border wall was, as much as it was a disaster for the border communities, it was also an environmental and lands conservation and animal conservation disaster. And so that couldn't have stopped sooner. We have to make sure that our frontline communities, our communities that are suffering from climate change induced disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, that are farm workers, that are outdoor laborers, that are suffering from heat exhaustion and even death, that are children that are suffering from asthma, 40% more likely to die from asthma, that these members of our community, these vital frontline community members, that their priorities in their communities and their voices are heard. And so when you look at these priorities, the important part is, that they exist. And the ones that you named, stopping the oil and gas leasing on public lands, including the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is just killing our indigenous brothers and sisters out there and ending their caribou herd. Restoring national monuments, beautiful national monuments that the Trump administration cut in order to, as a gift to oil and gas and mining polluters. And so all these things are very important if they're properly enforced. And they're also very important if our community makes sure that we are heard and that we benefit from these. That is key. So, it's important that Poder Latinx is putting this on and that they're highlighting these executive orders, which aren't often the most sexy things to highlight, but they're important. And that we follow the regulatory rulemaking as we go along. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. I think, like you said, a lot of the other executive orders or a lot of the other attacks that have been directed at our community are intersectional with climate. Like you said, the border wall was a huge environmental, really atrocity, like that was going to kill our wildlife, not only affect so horribly our community. So I agree with you that a lot of the other executive orders that don't particularly fall under the climate category are really an intersection of all these issues: immigration, economic justice, environmental justice. We know that all of these different issues are intersectional with race and all these other different things. So thank you for sharing that. I really quickly wanted to go back a little bit to highlight the importance of some of these particular executive orders from the Poder Latinx stance, specifically the one that focuses on centering the disadvantaged communities as it relates to climate action. I think we've repeated a couple times, and I'm sure our viewers know that brown and black communities are the worst impacted by the climate crisis. And the working group to assist communities impacted by power plants specifically is one that is really, really significant for our communities here in Orlando, which is where I'm based out of. Poder Latinx has been actively involved in the coal fight against the Orlando Utilities Commission, also known as OUC. If you're watching from Orlando, I'm sure that a lot of you are under OUC jurisdiction. You pay your bills to them. And we know they have been burning coal in their Staten Energy Center in Avalon for a really long time, and this has been polluting our community. We know that coal-fired power plants are the biggest source of greenhouse gases in the United States. Coal pollutes our air, our water, kills our wildlife. It causes illnesses to the people in our community, such as bronchitis and asthma. It harms our children's health and our elders' health. Last year, I believe it was in November, if I'm not incorrect, OUC actually promised to stop burning coal and transition to natural gas at the Staten Energy Center in Avalon. but this isn't really the wind that our communities wanted. We want renewable energy, not another fossil fuel that's going to continue to pollute our planet. It's also not a huge victory when we consider the huge piles of coal ash that sit in these communities. When you're passing through Avalon, you're not going to miss it. There's these huge piles of coal ash that are just sitting there in the middle of homes and parks and schools and businesses, and a lot of people don't know that this is like actively harming them in their lungs and their children. And like I said, it's really detrimental to our health. It causes cancer as well as a whole list of other health problems. So this is a fight that Poder Latinx has been involved in, and it's something that we really focus on here in Orlando, because when the wind blows in these communities, which we know the Florida, climate is kind of weird, this coal ash blows into these neighboring communities, and coal ash is so toxic. And like I said, a lot of people in our community, they're not really aware of it, because it's not something that they can see right there entering their body, so they don't know about it. So that's something that we've been trying to do. We've been trying to reach out to the people in these communities, let them know, like, hey, do you know that the thing that's 2 miles down the road that you see every day on your way to work, like, it's actually harming you? And hopefully these executive orders and all the different language that comes with it is a good first step in helping us in this coal fight, and pushing OUC to stop polluting our communities. And before I go into like what I think they need to do, not only OUC, but the administration, I know you kind of went over this a little bit as far as what we need to do, next steps in the climate, fight. But is there anything else that you wanted to add? Maybe, something particular to like your organization or anything like that, as far as what we need to do going forward, or what the administration needs to do?
Well, number one, we need to support the efforts, the fights, the campaigns of our local frontline communities. That's where it's happening. There's one thing that you could be confident about, Jennifer, is that you will never find those industries, those polluting sectors, those plants. You'll never find them in the rich communities. You'll never find them in the wealthy white communities. And so they always stick them in our communities. And that is systemic and institutionalized racism, cut and clear, that the Latinx community is leading on the fight. And the brown and the black community, when they come together and the front lines and they address these issues, there's nothing that we can't win. And we need to make sure that we do it together. We do it with love, and we beat back this institutionalized and systemic racism that leads this to happen over and over and over again, and leads to the decline in our livelihoods, the decline in our communities, our children. You see this over and over again in communities across the country where there's lead in the water, lead in the soil, high level of air pollutants, smog, SOx and NOx and other chemicals. And it's just, these are pollutants that find their way into our children's lungs, and they affect us for our whole lives. And that doesn't just, you think of these things as urban problems, but it also happens our farm workers and pesticides, and how it affects them and how it affects their children and the next generation. This is genetic issues that we're talking about. And so, it is clear cut that these are our issues, that we are the front lines, but that we are also the communities that were taught by our tias and our abuelos to respect, that we have a responsibility to reuse and repurpose and protect our lands. And you see that. But we need to make sure that every generation knows that it's our responsibility and it's passed down to us, and that it shouldn't just be taken for granted, or it shouldn't be assumed that this is less important than other issues, that this is something that's passed on to us. It's our legacy, and that we have the responsibility to come together. We always win when we come together, to come together in community, to support each other, to share our resources, our access, our power. We all have different resources and access and power, and to be able to come together to fight the moneyed interests, the polluting interests that we see. And so that goes from the bottom up. And when it starts to get to the top, that means tracking what this administration is doing, not what they say, tracking what they do, tracking if they're giving 40% to disadvantaged frontline communities, tracking if they're pushing for racial equity, tracking if they're stopping the pollutants, not the overall number of pollution in our air, but the number that is in our communities. They can say we're cutting pollution by 30%, and it could be in every other community but ours. So we need to be attentive and tracking, and Green Latinos wants to play a part and make sure that we get that information out, and so that we together with Poder Latinx and other leading groups, Hispanic Fed, LULAC, and others, can lead the fight on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that one of the biggest things that comes at the next steps is holding the administration accountable for all the promises that they have made for our communities. And this is beyond climate. This is for everything that our community needs. But specifically talking about climate here, I think that it's important that we don't stop at the first things that we're given, right? Like, we are already at a point in time where the climate crisis is killing people. I mean, people are really, really suffering with the consequences of a warming planet, we see the wildfires, we see extreme weather. We're seeing that right now, actually, across the country. And this is all very real. It's not like a hypothetical anymore. It hasn't been for a really long time. So it's up to us, unfortunately, to hold the administration accountable to everything that they say, and to go beyond the things that they did in the first few days, in the first few weeks. It's going to take continuous, bold action to reach what we really need, which is equitable solutions to a climate crisis that was caused by, like you said, huge corporations, not by us, but by huge corporations. But now it's up to us, unfortunately. There's power in the people, there's power in el pueblo, so it's about what you said. Like, it's about education, it's about reaching our communities, when a lot of the times we're left behind when it comes to these conversations. We know that the climate space is very white dominated. It often doesn't center the voices of brown and black communities, and that's what we need. We need the people who are most affected at the front lines of all climate action. We need to push the administration to go beyond their first few executive orders, and continue those bold steps, and until we build up an equitable future. And yeah, I think what our organizations are doing are great ways to reach the community. Unfortunately, like, I would love to be out with you all, knocking on doors and telling you, like, did you know that this is happening in your backyard? But for now, this is what we can do, and we're going to continue to do it until it's safe to go back out and meet with you all face to face. But yeah, I also want to mention that it's going to take a long-term solution to the coal problem that we see, coal and fossil fuel problem that we see, not only here in Orlando, but in so many other cities in the United States that are proportionally brown and black communities. Like you said, we're the ones that live closest to all these toxic facilities, and we're the ones who are left out of the conversation when it comes down to it. So these solutions can include strong federal rules protecting our health from the exposure of toxic coal ash pollution. And I'm really, really hoping that we see some of these steps with this administration. And I'm really, really hoping that OUC starts putting people over profit and transitions to renewable energy, cleans up that disgusting coal ash that lives in our communities. And yeah, I'm really hopeful for the next things that not only us as individuals, but our organizations and our communities are going to do to combat the climate crisis. But moving on.
And I love that, people over profit, Jennifer. And I love that, you are one of those people that is making sure that it's people over profit. You can't just say it. You have to live it, and you have to push it, and then urge other people to join in with you. And so, thank you for being that person that's doing this, bravely taking the lead on this in your community and nationally, as Poder Latinx has that footprint. It's so important. So thank you. I feel like there's so many battles that we have and so many issues on our front line, and strong issues of, as I mentioned before, the continuous and horrible effects of institutionalized and systemic racism on our communities that affect us internally and psychologically, but affect our communities most deeply, and that we have not looked enough to those communities. I'm talking on a federal level for the answers. It shouldn't be top down. If you live it, then you know the solutions. And so being able to make sure that equity in our voice, in who's at the table, and who's represented, and who's negotiating, and how the solutions are going to fall out, and who they're going to help. And so all these things, while they may seem technical in nature, but they are vital to make sure that we keep, as Javier Vega 64 just said, our health first, and our communities first, and the moneyed interests, which have been, both with Republicans and Democrats, unfortunately to say, the most important voices, have got to take a back seat to the village, the community. And so I'm really happy that you're doing these Instagram lives, that you're doing one on this issue, and that you keep going.
Yes, thank you. Kind of what you said, that bottom up thing. I wanted to quickly plug in our community meetings that we have, actually, which is, kind of what you talked about. I live in Orlando. I pay my bill to OUC, and a lot of other people are really starting to get involved in this issue. So we're hosting community meetings on a bi-weekly basis, the same week as the Instagram Live. So if you're here from Orlando, you should tune in on Thursday. It's at 6 p.m. and it's over Zoom, of course, and it's really just going to be discussing the next steps in this coal fight, from the people who really are living it, from the people who live in the communities, and we're going to be discussing what we as a community want to collectively do next and focus on next as a coalition of community members fighting against OUC. So like I said, that's on Thursday over Zoom at 6 p.m. You can find information on how to register on our Poder Latinx Instagram page, which you obviously all know because you're on here. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we had our first one of the year, our first community meeting of the year, and we had a couple of volunteers show up from the community, and we actually, we were like, you know what, we want to take action. Like we don't want to keep talking about all the things that are damaging our health or damaging our communities. We want to do something about it. And I was like, okay, let's go to OUC. So we drove to the Sand Energy Center last week on Wednesday with signs, and we posted up right there outside the huge pollution that's going on in front of the pile of smoke, the coal ash piles, and we held up our signs that said, OUC, stop lying to your community, because they're telling us it's clean energy. They're telling us it's not detrimental to our health. They're actually telling us that it's good for our health, that it's good for our gardens, that it's good for all this stuff. So, we held up our signs, stop lying, stop burning gas, stop burning coal, healthy communities for all, basically, is what our sign said. And we put those pictures up on our Twitter, so if you guys haven't checked them out, go ahead and go to our Twitter. You can see them there. There's some really great pictures alongside our volunteers, and hopefully the next time we go, it'll be those amount of volunteers times 5, right? We want to keep building up our people that are directly affected by this until OUC starts to listen to the people who they're serving. So
keep building. They will listen.
Yeah,
keep going.
Is there anything that you wanted to share from your organization that's coming up, or any action items that you all have?
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity as well. Please, Green Latinos is a national network of Latinx environmental and conservation advocates from every different sector of the movement, in local environmental justice, mainstream organizations. If you are an individual who works there, if you work in the government sector, if you work in renewable energy, corporate, academia, foundations, please join us. We need people from all different sectors of the movement that have unique resources and access and power to be able to support each other professionally, support our communities, and support our campaigns. The only way we win is if we work together. And so please come to GreenLatinos.org. Take a look. If you like what you see, sign up, become a member. We are make sure that we support our members professionally, their campaigns, as we build community and to create a more just and representative environmental movement. On just Friday, we closed a letter signed by 36 Latinx serving organizations, 18 additional environmental organizations that emphasize the need to coordinate clean transportation access across federal agencies in consultation with brown and black communities. And so it was a great response that we got, and many other individuals signed on as well. And so we released it last week. It's available on our website. And so we're trying to phase out fossil fuel powered vehicles by 2035 and electrify all vehicles by 2050. Invest in clean transportation networks. Establish clear incentives for cutting pollution for medium and heavy duty trucks. There's a lot of issues that we have in our communities are located in these high transportation density areas, freeways, ports, goods movement like Amazon and others. And that air is so polluted, and it affects our children and affects our communities. And so we need to make sure that we take the lead on clean transportation and pushing that as well. We also have been taking volunteers to join us on annually we have a fly-in where we meet with members of Congress to talk about our priorities, but we're doing a virtual fly-in this year. And so we'll be holding these meetings virtually over Zoom with members of Congress and their staff to continue our advocacy on the issues of importance to our communities. So please look us up, sign up for that, join this virtual advocacy effort federally and locally, and be a part of the community. Right now we're in a time of isolation in this Zoom and COVID, and we're in a time where we see death all around us and despair. But the one thing that always brings our communities together is our compadres and our comadres, and the power we have of community and the love that we share for us, and our food and our drink and our music and our joy. And so we must find ways to bring that back. That's our power. That is our power. And if we can't let that be taken from us. So continue to build community, be creative. This Instagram live is me being creative. It's actually Jennifer being creative and me learning from her. And so things like this, we need to make sure we keep building. This is not a break time. There is no breaks right now. We're in a documentary moment where we have to show that we have the power, that we are brave, that we are invested in our communities, that we can pull away from, not right now, but our social media and those things and hit what's happening us in real life. And so I welcome everyone to find what drives them, find their passion, find what moves them, build that community and make a change. This is an amazing moment we live in right now. And this generation, this younger generation is a great generation. And so following Black and brown and indigenous communities, following the young people, and making sure that the support is there, and making sure that we're doing this together. It's an exciting moment to find what drives you. And I hope if it's environment, if it's energy, if it's conservation of lands and water, if it's out of respect for your ancestors, then join us and join Poder Latinx and make sure that you're part of that battle.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for joining us on this episode. I really, really look forward to seeing the work that Green Latinos continues to do for our communities. And not only that, but seeing what we can do together now that we have done this episode and now that we know a little bit more about our organizations. And for those watching in Orlando, again, hope to see you all at our community meeting on Thursday. If you want information on how to register to that, just go ahead and look at our main Instagram page, and you can find a link to register on there. Don't forget to follow Green Latinos on Instagram. I'm sure your website is linked so they can check out all the great information that you let us know about on their Instagram. And I think that's all for this episode. We ended right on time. It's 4:30. That's perfect. Again, thank you, Mark, for joining us, and I'll see the rest of you at our next episode in 2 weeks. I'm really excited to see you all there again. So thank you, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Poder Latinx. Let's keep going.
Yes, awesome. Bye, everybody. Thank you.